Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Outlander is the TV show from Starz Entertainment about the semi-time travelling Fraser clan and their pals in 18th century North Carolina. Episode 9, The Birds and the Bees, picks up right after we left off last week, with a stunned and traumatised Brianna shuffling in her room in the inn, with a bloodied nose, now being questioned by a fearful and concerned Lizzie. She tells Lizzie to go to sleep, but it's plain what's happened, and Bree isn't in any sort of state to talk about it or accept any comfort from Lizzie. Next morning, Roger's cooled down and, he returns to make things up with Bree, only to find Stephen Bonnet sitting eating breakfast and asking for him to get back to the ship. See, it turns out that Wilmington wasn't actually the last stop on the trip, and they've still got to go to Philadelphia before Roger's work's done, contracts and everything. And Roger's not happy about it, but, Bonnet makes clear that, he hasn't really got much say in the matter, and bad things will happen if he doesn't do it. So when Bree wakes up later on and she heads down to the ship, she finds out it's already left, so Roger's gone. And then, her total moment of woe, Lizzie pops up and says, she bumped into a Scotsman who told her about surgery performed at the theatre by the wife of a man named Jamie Fraser, and that Jamie and his wife are in Wilmington that very day. So luckily, Bree manages to find Jamie as he's having a wee whittle against the wall, and at first, he thinks that she's trying to proposition him, and then she tells him who he is, and they have a tearful cuddle, and then it's all "Hi mum, I'm back in time," and it's tearful cuddle number 2. And still, the Frasers are shocked to learn that they're going to die in a fire, apparently. But as young Ian wanders up to say hi, and at first, it looks like he might be keen on this lassie they've turned up with. But then they point out that she's his cousin, and he's okay then. But not to worry, because it looks like Lizzie might have the hots for you, son. Nice one. And they're back on the barge, and it seems finally the studio's managed to fix the green screen, because it actually looks okay, or at least it does in some shots. But during the long boat ride, it's clear that Bree's upset, and she tells her mum about Roger, but she keeps kind of stewing about Bonnet and the rape, which is made worse because Ian then ends up telling her about how a charismatic Irish pirate robbed them, killed their pal, and stole Claire's ring, which of course puts Bree in a right puggle. And back on the road, Jamie and Claire discuss the fire, and Bree coming back, and they're really wary about whether they can actually change the future. But before you know it, they're back to CGI backdrops for the umpteenth time this season, but then onto the homestead where Murtagh turns up for some cheerful meet and greets. And there's a wee bit heartwarming everyone around the kitchen table, and Murtagh tells stories about how Jamie was a youth, and Bree ends up blowing off Claire's story about George Washington because she's tired and she goes to bed. And the next day she's helping her mum make remedies for Lizzie's sudden convenient malaria, and it's clear that she's out of sorts, and Claire puts it down to broken-heartedness over Roger. And speaking of Roger, he's made it to Philadelphia and he managed to get his pay and his freedom for Bonnet, but he's taking his payment in gemstones rather than coins. Clever, thinking ahead. Anyway, some unspecified time later, Bree's hanging out at Fraser's Ridge, and she's doing farming and she's helping out, and she's even getting to bond a bit with Jamie over rifle shooting, and it turns out that she's a crack shot. One of the things that she learned off Frank was how to shoot rifles. And that brings up a bit of difficult conversation and some emotions from everyone involved. But it's basically alright, because everyone's okay. And Claire has the idea that Jamie should take Bree out hunting. So he does, but they're not hunting deer or fishing or anything like that, like they did with Wee Willie. Instead, Jamie takes her out bee hunting. And once they find a nest on a tree, they sit down to wait for dark, and they have a bit of a heart-to-heart. And Jamie points out that, he doesn't actually hold any anger towards Frank, because he can't replace him in Bree's eyes, but he wants to have a part in his daughter's life, and that she should call him Da. Oh. Anyway, this brings out more emotions in him, and he gets a bit sad that she's going to have to go home to the modern day sometime. Anyway, spring's in the air, and Bee symbolically looks at some baby birds, and then Lizzie comes up to drop exposition about Bree having nightmares, and then mentions that she's off to the mill with Ian, but is pretty much told to go away. And then later on, Bree's picking some wild garlic with her mum, and Claire's managed to figure out that Bree's actually up the duff, and Bree's it's about 2 months long now. 2 months, okay, seems fast. Anyway, Bree kind of lets that drop, and it might not be Rogers, and then tells her mum that she might not have actually been able to fight the man off, and she's clearly upset about this, and Claire's heartbroken and gives her tearful hug number 3. And then Claire tells Jamie about it that night, and he's furious, obviously, but what can they do about it? They've got to figure out what they got to do. And the next day, Roger finally arrives at Fraser's Ridge or thereabouts, and gets spotted by, of course, you've guessed it, Lizzie, who of course tells Ian that he's actually a bad man, and they rush off to Jamie. And then Lizzie pretty much lays on the blame for the rape at Roger's feet, saying that she knows it's him. She absolutely knows. Atonement. Anyway, meanwhile, Claire's found her own ring in the guest room shelter thing, and she confronts Bree, who says that she didn't want to tell Claire about it because she didn't want her to feel even more guilty about it happening, because she thought that maybe it was because she'd gone to try and get that ring. But Jamie, of course, doesn't know any of this, so he goes storming up and finds Roger, and then Roger asks for directions, and then he gets his face totally pounded into mush, and that's him dead. The end. I'm just kidding, he's not dead, obviously. A wagon comes past, and then that ends up stopping Jamie, because wee Ian's no, quick, don't. So they stop from beating him to death, and instead, they stick him on his horse, and Ian rides off, taking him off somewhere strange. Ooh. So what did I think? Well, so this week was one that actually the fan base has clearly been waiting on a long time. You know, it's an episode full of reunions, like first meetings and people keeping secrets and stuff. And I'm only tangentially kind of knowledgeable about the book side of things and like what the fandom really likes, but you know, big stuff. But even I know that like meeting up between Brianna and Jamie is going to be something big and special. You know, it must be up with the red dress in season 2 and like the print shop scene. Also, like as a fan of the show, I mean, it's a big deal because these are characters finally meeting after like be a long time apart. I mean, we've known about like Bree being there since the end of season 2. I mean, we knew before that anyway, before she went away, but we've not actually gotten a chance to see these two characters come together for over a season. I mean, nearly 2 seasons if you add it all together. And there's still like a load of plot threads left dangling from last week. I mean, there's Bree's rape, Bree and Roger, what Lizzie saw, Claire and Jamie's stuff at the theatre. I mean, that didn't really get covered, but anyway, I have to give credit to the actors this week. I mean, most particularly like to Sophie Skelton and also to like Katrina Balfe and to Sam Heughan because I mean they all did amazing work, especially in the wee emotional scenes. I mean, the bit between Sam and Bree, that little bit where he touches her face. I mean, that was a beautifully observed little moment. And like Sophie and Katrina doing the bit between the two major scenes between them, like, the scene where she actually tells her what happened, and then the scene where she confronts her about the ring. I mean, those are scenes that are really emotive and really kind of heart wrenching in a way. And I think the actors acted their wee hearts out. I mean, it was really good. It was believable, and it was really touching. I mean, it was also good to see that life in general is kind of just going on at Fraser's Ridge. I mean, the lean-to's now been built into a proper guest house sort of shed sort of thing, and Jamie's like talking about how they have settlers on the land. I mean, these are things that are going well for them, and it's nice to know that considering the show made a big point of these a few episodes, like with major plot points, like the fact that Jamie couldn't get any tenants for the land, but clearly he now has. And it was also great to like the fact that they've nailed the look of that barge with the green screening. I mean, God, I mean, it looked so bad a few weeks ago, and this week pretty much every shot it looked okay, if not actually pretty much realistic. There was a couple of them that the lighting wasn't 100%, but that's fine. And they needed to bring back the big scenic shot of Fraser's Ridge again, but at least they didn't dwell on it for very long because I'm getting sick to death of seeing it. Another thing that could go some way to cheering up book fans is they had a big sit down at the table about Jamie's youth, and like Bree was hearing stories about like Jamie when he was younger, which I'm told is a really big thing that was missing from the episode, like because Jenny wasn't in it a few weeks ago. I mean, I might be wrong there, maybe it's not enough, or maybe it's not the right thing, but anyway, I thought it was fun, and I liked an awful lot of stuff in this week. But to be honest, to a certain extent, and you're going to be surprised, I was kind of bored this week, and here's why. Right, first things first. I'm not a book reader. I mean, we know that by now. And I do like these characters, but I don't adore these characters. They're not my favourite characters in anything I've ever seen ever. I'm not invested in that level of the thing. So, I mean, I'm dependent on the show to actually move me by what happens rather than what happening moving me just because it's what's happening. If you know what I mean, that maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. But put it this way, right? Case in point, the red dress one that I mentioned before, that really didn't mean anything to me because the show didn't actually bother building the backstory about it. It meant something to people who'd read the books, but it meant absolutely nothing to people who hadn't read the books because it was just a red dress. I mean, it looked nice and she looked good in it, but it was more shocking to me, to be honest, on the same episode that the King's Consort was wearing like weird swan boob things. I mean, this is the problem with it because if you haven't actually laid the groundwork that the novel did, then it doesn't really mean anything. And it's sure it's all good for book fans to watch it and to get really invested, but to everyone else it was like, okay, that happened. Why would I care? It's fine. Alternatively, the print shop, that really did work because the emotions of the characters were there, and the show like took a long time to really build it up and actually get the characters to the right place emotionally and to bring the audience with it. And I know there was a big thing about it that people complained because Jamie was supposed to fall over and cry or faint or something like that in the middle of it when he saw a picture of Bree, and that was a big hoopla, and people were really cross about that and not being included. But to be honest, I mean, I didn't know that was supposed to be there, and I didn't miss it, and I don't really know if it would have been better for me or worse because I can't really tell, but I was entirely happy with the scene as it was. I don't think that would have been more important to me. But this week, I, I mean, Jamie was peeing on a wall. I mean, literally, he's peeing on a wall, and then 2 seconds later, he thinks he's being propositioned because I mean that clearly happens to him every time he goes to Wilmington. I mean, it happened with the horny like wife of the blacksmith the other week. So. I mean, then she says who she is, and yeah, I mean that bit was really sweet. And then literally 2 seconds later, he's like, "Have you spoken to your mum yet?" And then like literally, we get almost exactly the same of reunion again with like Claire coming up and going, "Oh," and it's nice. I mean, I'm not saying it's not nice, and I'm not saying the actors didn't do a good job, but I was like, "Oh, is that it? Okay, is that all there was? I thought there might be more. I might have thought there might be something a bit more profound." And I mean, I suppose it could have been worse. Like Claire could have been on the toilet, or she might have thought that Brie was a prostitute. Anyway, but I mean, that's one of those big scenes, as far as I can tell, that's supposed to be massive. And I've got to be honest, I was totally underwhelmed, or at least I was maybe whelmed, but it might have been more of an under. Anyway, I don't really know what goes down in the book in this bit, but I kept thinking this is a wee bit mundane, a little ordinary. Another issue was that there's so many scenes of people just kind of sitting and chatting in this thing that don't really amount to much because little of it seems to be specifically focusing on Bree. I mean, if we got this and it was all very much from Bree's point of view, very internalized, that we really saw that it was all about her, with these secrets. I mean, that would have been different. That might have been a more interesting way to play this. But instead, it was kind of just like it was a bit like the Waltons. I mean, it kind of there was a little bit of a house on the prairie sort of feel about this. It was just people getting on with their day, and that's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't really make for compulsive TV viewing. Again, if you're not invested in it in the way, but because you've read the books and you know what's happening, then it just kind of ended up being a bit sort of like, oh, okay, what's happening now? Okay, okay, that's all right. What's happening now? And then the other problem was that the episode had a real problem with properly explaining like the passage of time through the episode. I mean, everything in the first 20 minutes or so happens over one day, and that's fine. But then it's the day after the last week's episode, so there's a lot like still hanging in the air. But after that, it all kind of goes to pot. I mean, because they travel to Fraser's Ridge first by barge and then by like horse and carriage, and that took ages in the previous episodes. I mean, it doesn't actually say did they stop at Jocastas on the way or did they just go straight there. I mean, maybe they just went straight there. But even then, it took Claire and Jamie overnight to actually get there, so we didn't get to see at least one stop overnight. And it took them going by barge. I mean, they had to stop overnight there as well. So I mean, this should be a 2 or 3 day journey that it looks like they did in 5 minutes. And I know like they're condensing it down, but then the problem is that gets confusing because then when they get there, there's conversations you think they would have already had. And then once they arrive there, it's only like a small montage later. And then Jamie says that he's only been hanging around his daughter for a couple of weeks. And then 2 scenes later, she says that she's probably 2 months pregnant. And then like Roger's back from Philadelphia, and that's 500 miles away, and so that would have taken him maybe a month, but it shouldn't have taken him that long to get there by sea, presumably. So you think he would have been back before then, and then all these things just kind of contradicting each other just confused me. And mostly the problem was the people saying things that didn't make sense. Like after the bit where there's the montage where we finally get to see Bree wearing trousers, which is apparently another big thing that people are really obsessed about, but I don't know why. But that was a weird thing that suddenly after that, the fact that she's called Bree comes up. Now you think, hang on, is this supposed to have been a day, 2 days, a week, a couple of weeks, and then nobody in all that time actually called her Bree, even considering the fact that Claire's been calling her Bree for ages, hasn't she? I mean, honestly, you're saying that Claire only ever referred to her as Brianna in all the time that she's been hanging around Jamie? That seems a bit unlikely to me. Or, I mean, put it the other way, it's like the bit when, Lizzie says that she's off with Ian, which I actually really like that scene because she's clearly trying to hint to Bree that she fancies Ian, and, and she gives him that, like, creepy sex stare on the barge. But the point is, she says she's off to the mill with him, and then there's a scene at night time, and then the next day she's hanging out with him. So, I mean, yeah, maybe it's more than, maybe she's just hanging out with him a bit more, and that was supposed to tell us that. But that felt like those two scenes should have come back to back without a scene of, like, Claire and Jamie at night in the middle. And also, speaking of Lizzie, did you notice that when they first arrived that first night, like we suddenly get the hint of what I'm going to call conveniently ill Lizzie syndrome? I mean, Lizzie's fine there and she looks fine all over the place, and then suddenly that night, boom, malaria. Oh, she had to go to bed because malaria. And then suddenly nobody seems right that bothered, and Claire's like, oh, well, I better give her something for her malaria. Malaria kills people. It's serious. And then the showrunners clearly just needed to get her out of the way and have her not being part of conversations. And it seemed like a really clunky way of doing it. I mean, it's a bit like when Lord John and Jamie were there playing chess and Claire was outside hanging about in the shed. And yeah, it just seemed a bit, clunky. And now they've got Bree and Lizzie and Ian and Myrta and Jamie and Claire, and they're all hanging about in basically in one house that's got like one room in it and a wee shed outside. I mean, where's Myrta sleep? Is he sleeping in a tree or something like that? I mean, it must be awfully cozy inside that house. But still, they managed to find ways for people to have one-on-one conversations. But I mean, the thing is, for me, the big one, and this revolves around Lizzie still, and I'm sure this would probably be echoed by overjoyed followers, was that I didn't actually like her character much because I didn't, and her character made no sense to me. And it's got nothing to do with the actress being too tall or having the wrong hair color. I mean, that stuff doesn't matter to me at all. Like, it's the fact that at one stage, Brianna says,
she's been a good friend to me.
Has she? When? When's she been a good friend to you? In fact, everything we've seen so far makes it a point that actually you can't be bothered with in the slightest. In fact, not so much of a good friend that you actually ever bothered to mention to her about Roger, or describe him, or anything, or mention at any point in the 2 months that have followed that actually, no, you did meet up with Roger very briefly and got handfasted. Something you might have mentioned, like maybe mentioned to this, who's your only female friend, your own age, for 2 months. I mean, she never once mentioned that at all. I mean, I'm sure some people will say, oh, yeah, but then that might have then brought up the rape thing. But it's like, no, it was ridiculous, convenient writing and plotting. And I don't know if that's from the book or not. I mean, it might well be, but it might not be at all. But the fact is, she never mentioned any of this stuff. And the fact is, the only reason she couldn't have mentioned any of this stuff to her is because it would immediately have prevented the really totally obviously foreseeable confusion of all that that ended with her. And exactly what I predicted last week, atonement, that she was going to end up thinking it was Roger and not the other guy. And the problem with that is it feels really forced. And I don't know. I mean, again, maybe it makes more sense in the books, but this was just clunky, and I didn't buy that she gets sudden malaria and then suddenly didn't talk to everyone. And I'm sure, it's fair enough. But this is apparently somebody who made the trip all the way from Ayr to Wilmington by sea with Bree, and not even once she mentioned these things. Didn't work for me at all. Didn't buy it. It came across as wrong to me. And then one other thing is actually the final scene with Jamie beating the heck out of Roger, and then just stopping and telling Ian to ride off with him because he doesn't want to make him a murderer. Nothing's stopping Jamie killing him. I mean, let's face it, this is Jamie. I mean, and I'm pretty sure didn't Ian end up helping Jamie hide a body in a cask of creme de menthe? I mean, maybe I don't remember that right, but I was sure, was he not part of that? I mean, would that not really matter? Does it matter at this point? I mean, Ian's been part and parcel of so much of the stuff that they've done so far that I don't think that Jamie would actually care. And the other thing is, I don't think Jamie would hold back from killing the guy who raped his only daughter. I mean, honestly, this is something Jamie's going to understand and be angry about more than pretty much most people. So the fact that he just punches his face in a bit and then he just stops and goes, "Oh, just get him out of my sight." I didn't, no, I don't believe that. I didn't, it felt weird, it felt clunky, and it felt like a bit strange. And even despite the fact that, as I said, I've lost interest in Roger as a character because he's been such an arsehole the last few weeks. But the fact is, it's still horribly shabby what happens to him, and I presume that's the point. And I presume this is going to come up back to some big thing where, Jamie's obviously going to find out later, oh, oops, I've beaten up the wrong guy, that's not so good, and maybe I'll make amends somehow. But the fact that, the fact he isn't dead kind of means that something's going to happen later on. But I don't know, the whole lot kind of just added up to a big mediocrity for me. And I don't know. I mean, I can only say what I feel about it. I really hope other people enjoyed it more than I do. I mean, I just wanted more from this. I felt that emotionally there should be more payoff for this, and I feel like the payoff, if a lot of people did feel it, maybe the payoff is because you've read the books and because you really invested in the characters. But on a terms of a show, like a TV show making thing, I just didn't feel it this week. So please let me know what you think in the comments. Tell me, what did you think about all this? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Am I right? Am I wrong? I mean, I don't know. Let me know. Anyway, for now, I really hope that you all had an absolutely lovely Christmas or holiday time. I mean, and I wish you all have a very lovely hogmanay, because I mean, that's technically going to be tonight by the time this video goes out. I mean, maybe it'll be tomorrow where you are, but for me, it's tonight. So I'm going to get to my bed, and then tomorrow I'm going to have a wonderful time. So you have a wonderful time as well, and have a happy new year. And until some point in 2019, a week from now, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.